topic that I'd like to share with you today is mathematics and music and mathematical patterns in nature as well. So before I get into everything regarding music, I'd like to talk about the raw elements of music, and that's sound. So frequencies are measured in hertz. Those are the units of sound, and it's easy to remember those because the lower notes have lower frequencies or lower numbers of hertz, and the higher notes have higher frequencies. And the sound waves are also measured in wavelengths to sort of give a visual reference as to what it would look like. Now this chart right here is a chart of the first 4 octaves, octaves 0 to 4, and it shows all of the notes and their frequencies in hertz. So the ones that I've outlined in red are middle C, or C in octave 4, which is 261.63 hertz, and G, which is on the same octave, 392 hertz. So the concept that I'd like to introduce, or maybe you've already heard of it, is an interval. So an interval is the ratio of frequencies between 2 notes. A fifth is a commonly referenced interval in music, and it means an interval between notes whose frequencies in hertz, like I mentioned, have exactly a 3 to 2 ratio. This may seem a little complicated at first, but I'll just show you for reference. So an example of the fifth are the ones that I outlined, are middle C and G. So here's middle C. Basically, middle C and G are examples of a fifth interval. So like I mentioned, C has 261.63 hertz, and G has 392 hertz. And now, this is an approximation. They're rounded to the nearest hundredth, but if you took the exact numbers, then if you took the exact numbers and divided them, 392 over 261.63, you would get the ratio of 3 over 2, approximately. Again, this is an approximation. And just to play you a demonstration of what these notes sound like, here we have middle C, and then we have a G. And that would be the interval. That's just an example of a fifth. This is a diagram that I like, that I found, that shows what the wavelengths, the visual wavelengths, representations of sound, look like based on the volume and also the pitch. So based on how loud or soft the pitch of the note is, the quieter pitches typically have a lower crest or top of the wavelength, and the louder pitches have a taller one. The deeper pitches are more stretched out, and the higher pitches are shorter or more compact. This is an actual diagram of a flute head. This would be what this is, and you can see the mouthful right there. And this just shows the wavelengths inside the flute that would be actually representing what the air would look like in the sound representation. So this segues into the next aspect of music that involves mathematics very heavily, which is the design of the physical instrument and the measurements that are involved. So to start off, I'll talk about wind instruments. And wind instruments, the spacing of the holes and the diameter of each hole is really important in getting the right pitch. Also, the sequence that they're pressed down in to get the right pitch, and how much air is required, which may not seem like it requires so much thinking, but actually it does require a lot of thinking by the person playing it, how much air you need, how fast your air needs to go. And so an example of this, we have a clarinet and a flute, like I showed you before, and the arrows are sort of pointing out the holes and how you can notice that they're different sizes from here. And you also notice right here that the spaces between the holes are also very different. And this may seem small, but the measurements are very precise, and this has a large effect on music that's produced. So, and after wind instruments, I also have string instruments. With string instruments, the length and the thickness of the strings are very precisely measured. Also the spacing of the strings, what sequence they're pressed down in, and how they're played, plucked, strummed, or otherwise played. And an example I have here are the guitar frets. And I have the guitar frets that actually mimic the Pythagoras ratios. And let me just explain what this means. So, if you see this final bar here, this final bar right here, imagine that as an entire octave. You take the string, and that's one octave. So what I have outlined in yellow is the 12th fret. And the frets are, if you don't know, the spaces where the player of the guitar knows how to put their fingers there. And so if you place it on the 12th fret, you're basically dividing the entire string in half. So if you were to play one octave note when you play the entire string, this will play the same note, but one octave higher, which I think is very interesting because it shows the inverse proportions of the instrument. And this also applies to wind instruments as well, as they're scaled up and down with sizes. Now, I've referenced the raw elements of music, such as the sound and the structure of the actual instruments that make the sound. And now, to tie it all together, I'd like to talk about the patterns in the actual musical compositions altogether. So, motif. Motif is a term that is used in music to reference a theme or a sequence of notes and rhythms that's recurring or repeated in a composition. And a leitmotif is a motif that's associated with a specific concept, such as, it's often used in movie music, so it could be a character or it could be a specific location. It could be associated with any sort of concept. But I want to make sure to mention that I know I've referenced sort of what seems like orchestral music and things of that nature, but I also want to point out that this is present in lyrical music as well. You will notice motifs and leitmotifs in lyrical music, rock music, pop music, whatever sort of music that you like, there are always motifs. These patterns are always there, and it's really interesting to notice. So the purpose of this was sort of to enhance the perspective and understanding of people, and sort of give a different type of lens on music when you're listening to it. So you're not just paying attention to how you feel when you listen to it, but why you feel that way, and why the things sound the way they do. And I wanted to make this presentation because you don't have to take music theory or be so into it to realize the beauty of the patterns and the math in music. And I realized when making this that we as people reflect in our forms of art the things we see and feel in our world and inside ourselves. And so, of course, if there are such mathematical patterns that we've all noticed in nature, which we've observed for a long time, it makes sense that there will be similar sort of a reflection of those patterns in our music and our other art forms. And so, learning these things helps us stay curious, and I think it makes the music actually more interesting when you listen to it. And I think that the purpose of this mostly is to give a greater appreciation for music and all the mathematical patterns that are involved in making it, and it'll help you enjoy it more. Thank you.
Good job, Eliza. And that concludes our TED Talk program. And I just want to thank everyone